So this is the project on me creating a Chaeto reactor with a hang-on back filter. And my experience with it, and to be honest, it wasn't successful at all. Or at least it was successful initially. So initially I decided to test this on my nano reef. I wanted to see if I could get some extra nitrate reduction by adding a hang on back filter with Chaeto in it. And if the Chaeto did really well, then I would actually replace my hang on back filter with a bigger one that had only Chaeto in it instead of running the algae scrubber. The algae scrubber I had on my tank just was too small, so I decided why not try Chaeto and test it out. And so I started with a smaller filter, a really small filter, to test it out and make the DIY simple. Or essentially, I just wrapped the filter with a grow LED, and then I wrapped the grow LED with aluminum foil, and that essentially lit the Chaeto from three sides. Now, this was somewhat problematic already because since it's wrapped around the filter, it means the light is also getting into the other parts of the filter that you don't want. But it made the DIY very simple. Now, this initial filter went pretty well. The Chaeto actually grew really well, to the point where I thought maybe it's time for phase two to buy a bigger filter, replace my old filter with a bigger one, and add the Chaeto to it. Something did start to go wrong with the other, my small Chaeto filter, but I thought it was a minor issue and would be solved by adding it to a bigger filter. And that issue was that algae started to grow in it after I gave it a trim. So I noticed that when I trimmed the Chaeto, that's when the algae really started to grow in the Chaeto. But I figured this would be a minor issue, and once I got a bigger filter space for it, that the Chaeto would actually outcompete the algae in there since it had more space to grow. And the bigger filter I decided to go with to do this was a Cascade 200, which is a blue hang-on back filter. I wanted a hang-on back filter that is the most clear from the outside, because as you can see, what I did was I wrapped the LEDs around. Wrapping the LEDs around the filter was probably the easiest way to make this DIY to light the Chaeto from all three sides, essentially working the same way a Chaeto reactor works. But like I said, there was the initial issue of light going in places you didn't want. Now I also had another issue with when I went to the Cascade 200. That was the DIY was way, way, way harder than I expected it to be. Um, and you might not see this as a problem, but one of the key things I think for DIY is that unless it saves you a lot of money, it has to be fairly simple. For example, if you're DIYing your own tank, yes, it's pretty complex and pretty hard, but it would save you a significant amount of money if it's a large tank. But DIYing a small tank just isn't worth it because of the time and energy it takes, and the cost of a small tank isn't that expensive. You could probably buy one for cheaper than it would cost to DIY one. And this was the same issue I came across when doing the algae scrubber on the bigger filter. It was just so time consuming that it became almost like I kind of started to regret it, just which isn't as important actually. Like, if you are to sacrifice anything in your hang on back filter, it would definitely be the mechanical filtration. I had to have my heater in there, and it also had to have enough space for the Chaeto reactor. Now, that's kind of a big haul for a hang on back filter, which isn't that big at all. And in the end, the Chaeto reactor space, because of adding all of this stuff to my filter, was just too small. The Chaeto didn't grow well. Eventually, I got into hair algae problems. I read online and they said dosing iron usually helps. That didn't help. And now I'm adding another level of complexity to nano reef that's supposed to be fairly simple to take care of, which is dosing iron. when instead I could just go with an algae scrubber with none of these requirements. DIY is much simpler, and generally, if you are using a big enough filter, you could fit all my three things that I mentioned, which are the heater, mechanical filtration, and algae scrubber in it. Because the algae scrubber doesn't really take much space. And I thought it was really important that I did this video because to let you guys know that not all my projects succeed, and it's also why like many people have asked me for a video on my tank setup, and I don't really like talking about my tank setup for this reason is that I go through quite a few changes on my tank setup, trying to find like the most efficient way to run it. And if I give you, let's say, told you my tank setup how it was back then with the Chaeto reactor. Let's say someone decides to do it, and then a few months later, I release a video saying, "Yeah, that didn't work well." Then, for my viewers, that's kind of a waste of money. If you want to know my tank setup, you could just drop a comment down below, and I'll let you know. Or you can message me on Instagram. It's the same as my YouTube channel, but no space. And I also want to mention is that my tank setup is quite different from the video right now, and it's currently in testing as well. I'm hopeful that this most recent test that I've been working on is successful, and I could actually release a full video on my tank setup, something that people could copy and emulate that would hopefully bring them a success as well. So if you want to stick along with this channel, don't forget to hit that subscribe button, and hopefully we could have some nice nano reefs that are fairly easy to keep while growing most corals under the sun, or should I say under the LED that you want.